Welcome to our PD Talking Circle for March. Let's go ahead and get disclaimed. This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred. We're going to be working on a few updates. We're going to be talking about your annual performance reporting, debt referral, the new PD grant competition, and a few reminders about some upcoming events. So lots of great information that we're going to be covering today. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Angela.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining this afternoon. It's good to see everybody's faces. Let's go to the next slide. We have a lot to cover today, as Sarah shared. And so I want to jump right in to talking through the annual performance report. And particularly as we talk about carryover, since 99.9% of you will have it in some shape or form. And so in thinking about the carryover, I want to talk big picture and make sure that we all start on the same page. So when we talk about carryover, for year 3, meaning the current budget year that we are in, your current budget, as we define it at the department, is all and any carryover you might have had from years 1 and 2, plus whatever you got in that year 3 award or that, September 30 grant award notification of 2020. So the cumulative is what I call your budget. So as you think about your budget and as you're talking about your budget, year 3 budget, just know I expect that when you're talking about it in your APR, it is that cumulative year 3 budget, years 1 and 2 carryover plus your year 3, just so we're all on the same page there. So really, when we get to using the term carryover in this year's APR, we're talking about what you anticipate, i.e. project, estimate, will be the year 3 funds that you will not have obligated by September 30 of 2021. So that would be what we call carryover that would go into year 4, right? So just want to make sure we're all on the same page as we talk about use these terms in this discussion. And if there's any questions at any point coming through the chat, my chat tends to go away, Sarah, so just call it out for me.
Absolutely.
So when you're go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying, yes, I will.
Okay, thanks. So when we're talking about carryover and you're explaining your carryover funds, I just shared here in this chart the very common reasons that we see carryover happen, right? Or that you're projecting carryover. So in the direct cost categories, which are your personnel, fringe, travel, contracts, other, supplies, it's all the stuff that you couldn't do, you, the grantee, right? So we didn't have staff for a certain period of time, or maybe somebody left, or you just didn't use as much due to the pandemic and circumstances beyond your control. You didn't use travel funds. There should definitely be travel funds for all of you because nobody made it to a project director's meeting, right? You would have quite possibly unused contract funds for a couple of reasons. One is maybe there were events that you did have scheduled for year 3 as part of training that just didn't happen because of the pandemic. Or it's that you thought by this point, let's say this spring, that you would be doing induction for at least some of your folks, and you're not because they're just not there. Weren't on track. So any number of reasons, that would be why you'd have unused contract costs. And I'm sure there are others, but I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the really common ones that we see across our grants. The training costs. So very nuanced but important distinctions. One is that for many of you, for lots of reasons, personal or institutional reasons, the participant is behind, right, in their training. So they haven't completed their training. You don't expect they will by May. And normally, or at least as you proposed in your original approved application, they would have. So they're behind. So by default, they're not using all the tuition or all the fees, stipend, et cetera, that you might have originally had scheduled or budgeted for them. The second is for any of the participants that you successfully recruited, but again, for any number of reasons, they did not stay. So exited without completion. So that's another reason, because you no longer needed the funds, right? They're gone. And the third is you never hit the target to begin with. So from years 1 and 2, and oftentimes, as you guys know, if you haven't ever recruited people you expected to recruit in year 1, you probably see a accumulating carryover amount, right, over the what is now 3 years, because you haven't used it for that much time. For some of you last year, meaning when you got your year 3 award, you got a reduction, in part because we knew well ahead of time that there was just no way that you were going to meet that. In other cases, you said you might and you were going to try, and we didn't cut, or maybe didn't cut as much, giving you the benefit of the doubt that maybe you could secure. In some cases that happened, and in some cases that didn't. So whatever the reasons, again, really explaining these reasons and why. And I don't need it participant by participant necessarily, unless you think there are some salient issues to raise. But in the aggregate, talking about, I've got 4 participants in this predicament, 2 in this, and 3 are doing just fine, right? So helping me understand the progress of each participant helps me understand how you're projecting your costs, or should be, going into year 4. Next slide, please. So here, and we're going to share out this slide deck with you after, but I'm going to walk you through just an example. And this gives you, this is sort of annotated, feel free to add more when you're doing your APR, but at a minimum, I want this type of detail that's explaining what that carryover is, what's left, what might be used, etc. So let's walk through this. In this example, I'm saying I'm going to have, I use a nice easy number, $200,000 that I'm not going to have obligated by the end of year 3. So I have all of that in what I project would be my carryover into year 4. So I'm explaining in the direct cost categories for travel. I thought I was going to use it. But I also say, I do want to use those funds that are remaining there in FY22 in year 4. I want to use them because I know that once we can all go back onto campus, we're definitely going to be stepping up, intensifying the efforts and making up for some of that lost time. Okay, so that's my scenario. 50,000 is, I had a late hire. And we also saw a jump in the level of intensity in terms of the time and effort that our staff had to take because of COVID. So we were having to reach out to our participants in different ways. We paid more in salary as a result, and or fringe. And so we know that we want to repurpose some of those funds into the next year for that same reason. So you see in my explanation under that 50,000 of what's remaining available, that really I want to use 20,000 in year 4. And so I'm saying of that 50,000, I really will only have 30,000 in carryover available. That right there is a critical distinction. It's important to know, and another way for me to put it is, when I walk away from having read your APR, I want to have a clear understanding of the money of that carryover that you intend to use and how, and what funds you don't foresee being able to use. You're just not going to have a scope or need based on the original approved application and on what you know you can do in the last 2 years. And then there's the 20,000 remaining In contract funds, I write mentors are not yet needed because students are behind and not yet at this phase. Again, doesn't mean I'm not going to use them, but this is a little fuzzy, right? It's a little less clear. Do I know that you're going to plan to use them in year 4? Not really. So be explicit. Be explicit about, yeah, I plan to use them either in year 4 or in year 5, depending on, the progress that our participants make in completing training, right? Whatever the reason or whatever your projection, if at the end of the day, if you really plan on using those funds at some point, not just in year 4, but even year 5, and I've talked with many of you, we've talked about the prospect of, well, there'd probably be a no cost extension because my folks are that far behind. If you plan on using those funds at any point in the next 2 to 3 years, say that. And, say, of course, it's contingent, right, on these students finishing. So then we get to the training costs. And with the training costs, it says here, I'm requesting to keep 68,000 of the 100,000 that's remaining in training costs. Why? Because I need that money, because the participants we have now, we're definitely going to try to keep and get them through. And I'll need that money to do that. I'll need that money to pay for that tuition. I'm even building into that cost the prospect of a retake of at least 2 courses for each participant. So whatever you're factoring into those training costs per participant, and you expect to use them again somewhere in that 2 to 3 year window, say that. And then you see here, I have 32,000 remaining available training funds not needed. I will not use this amount because we did not recruit one participant and the second participant dropped, meaning there's no place to shift those funds. So you're just not going to be able to use them in this case. And so you're just saying, yeah, of all that carryover, I really don't have at the end of the day 20,000 from direct costs and 32,000 from training costs. I don't have a repurpose for that. So that's 52,000 of that 200,000 that I'm saying that's going to be unexpended, and I have no plans for obligation of those funds. Okay, so that's the ideal. That would be really helpful for me to know the answer to those questions. When I don't have the answers to those questions in your APR narrative, I have to make assumptions. So just understand that. So if, dollar for dollar, anything not accounted for, or you're not being explicit that you're repurposing or projecting a need for in the out years, I will likely say, okay, well, we're probably going to cut that. And we cut, again, I want to be really transparent here for 2 reasons. One is we're not going to give you money you're not going to use for the original intent. And 2, because we are in the middle of a new grant competition, that allows us to repurpose those funds for new grants and for new projects. So, that's the hope too. If you end up taking the funds and you know very well you're not going to use them, what happens? Well, I'll say thank you because it's going to go to the Treasury and it might pay for the $2 in Social Security that I'll get in many years. But that's about it. It's not going to do anybody any good. And we lose, frankly, the whole mission and purpose, right? So if you know you can't benefit from it, if you have a pretty good sense that we're probably not going to get to that, then say that and let somebody have an opportunity to be able to support the success of their participants. So just to think about there. I'm going to pause. Did I get any questions in there? Nope. Any questions?
You're all set.
Okay. So again, we'll send these out afterward too, just kind of as a point of reference, but the more explicit you are, the more helpful it is down the line. Next slide. My pop quiz. All right. You want to click once, I guess, for me? I'm going to have, or I can take it over. I promise nobody will fail. My participant is behind in completing their training, and next year, year 4, they will need to continue required training coursework and will not yet be in a qualifying job placement. Will they have to start payback while they're still in training? Anybody want to proffer an answer? You can either do it written in the chat or you can unmute. I know you guys aren't shy.
Carmelita went with no.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, now we're getting a few more no's.
Okay, good. All right. Let's go ahead and throw up the answer there that I wrote. So no is the right answer. The service payback obligation, quote unquote, clock, right, does not begin until you, the grantee, exit that individual, that participant from the professional development program data collection system. So just remember that really the clock for service payback starts ticking the day you either say, one, they completed, yay, they graduated and they completed the training program, so now I exit them, or because they had to leave the program and you've exited them without completion. That is when the clock starts ticking for them, okay? Next question. 2, in my APR, should I discuss the job placement status of my participants who have successfully graduated and completed licensure?
Any, oh, there was a quick yes on this one from Kelly.
All right. Thank you, Alice, Rebecca. Okay. Yes, you guys are right. It is extremely important because, one, it relates to one of the GEPRA measures, right? And it helps us understand whether there are many or just a handful of participants who are encountering job placement challenges. And here's an ask. You're not required, but I really wish you would. Let me know that to the extent you have any participants who have finished successfully in the last year, and who are having trouble finding placement due to some COVID impacted reason. Okay, so whether it's the district stopped hiring because of COVID or whatever the reason, but if you think it's related to COVID, say that. And there's a good reason for this. So as you all know, we had the flexibility last summer where we said any participant who had successfully completed and graduated, met licensure, and whose service payback clock started ticking basically from May 19, because by September 19 through May of 20, we said that we were giving those people that graduated in that time period 24 months, not 12 months, but 24 months to find qualifying job placement. So we did that back in July 2020. It seems really like a long time ago, COVID-wise, in terms of COVID time, but we knew a lot less, right, about where we were standing with respect to the pandemic impact. And so we made a call and said we would extend it to anybody within that who graduated within that period. However, if I see that there are quite a few people impacted in terms of finding qualifying job placement as a result of COVID, that's something that I would want to call to the attention of leadership to see if we need to revisit that flexibility. So any kind of information that you think can be helpful to providing that context, to the extent there are challenges, I'd appreciate you sharing. And that would obviously benefit not just the outcomes for your grant, but certainly the participants. Okay. Next slide. I'm not done with my pop quiz. Number 3, if one of my participants has been on leave for a year and they need one more year of leave, can I allow this? Anybody want to guess?
Oh, Alice went with a quick no.
All right. Renuka, no. All right. Okay. Answer? The answer is no. And then we get into the legalese, right? We get into the program reg. It's a longer program, Reg, but I'm just highlighting, I bolded a couple here. So B, the project director may approve a leave of absence for a period not longer than 12 months, provided the participant has completed a minimum of 50% of the training in the project and is in good standing at the time of request. So that's a really important factor to consider, especially right now, in terms of leave and whether you think it will really benefit the student or not. And then D, a participant who is granted a leave of absence and does not return to his or her course of study by the end of the grant project period will be considered not to have completed the course of study for the purposes of project performance reporting. And what that means is at the end of year 5, even if you know that person's coming back after the grant ends, you're still having to exit them in the DCS as an exit without completion, right? And so that's always the challenge, guys, because if you're putting your best foot forward to try to help people get through. But I think you have to caution them, especially at this juncture in the grant, that if they leave and they come back, they risk this grant being over, right? You guys maybe don't do a no cost extension or don't extend any amount of time, and they don't get the benefit. They're going to have to, be able to do it on their own. So, it certainly has implications for your own performance reporting, but in real time in terms of real person impact, it impacts their ability to take advantage of the benefit. So just needing to weigh those options is something you want to consider. I'm going to stop here because I think we have some questions there, right, Sarah?
We do. So Carmelita said she has a pop quiz question for you. No, I'm putting those words in. She said she has a tough question for 2016 exiting student. I'll let her unmute and ask the toughie.
Okay.
Yeah, so Angela, I had an individual in the 2016 award who was exited because she could not pass her praxis.
Yep.
So she never gave up though. She continued to try to take the praxis, took it, passed it. Turtle Mountain Community College allowed her to student teach this semester. So she's not funded through the 2016 award, but the 2016 award is in a no cost extension for induction. Is she eligible for any induction support? Having been exited and brought back. Plus, how do I rectify this completer in 2016? Because she was exited, she came back, she's been supporting,
Yeah, but the grant is still active, correct?
It is. So I want to put her in the OIE database as a completer, and then she would be going to pay back.
That's a great point. And this is something, guys, that you should be thinking about in the out years, right? Because this is probably something that could very well help into each of you. Absolutely. You can, because it's still an active grant, yes, call the help desk, tell them, hey, this person has completed. I want to revise this. Can I do that? It doesn't matter whether they got the benefit or not to complete it necessarily, right? In this case. But yes, you can still count it toward that. And yes, absolutely. She can be part, or he can be part of that induction service activity and support.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. The next question is from Kelly on how to address GEPRA 4 regarding total cost per individual who successfully completes a teacher preparation program. And Kelly, do you want to unmute and kind of explain your specific question on that?
Okay, yes. I have been looking at this and I thought, and maybe I was just looking at it wrong, because I thought all of that information was the information that we're recording in the PDCS system, but that it's not necessarily something that I'm putting in my APR, because that's where I'm inputting all the data in that system, and that's where you all pull the information. But am I supposed to have those same GEPRAs worded inside the APR?
Kelly, thank you for that question. Here's the short answer. Yes, it's duplicative entry. You are not wrong. And this is a shortcoming on our end. All I can say is that I'm working to rectify it now that I can give a little bit more time to the program again. That's something I'm going to work on over this next year, in fact, to eliminate the duplicative data entry that I know that you're providing. So I'm fine with you, doing a copy paste, a screenshot, whatever you need to do from the DCS to simplify, because yes, you do enter it, and that's correct. But again, it is duplicative, but at this point in time, I'll ask you to be duplicative. And my hope, frankly, is that we rectify it by next year's reporting.
So then how do I report the average or the number? Do I take my individuals?
Just take all the current, it's a snapshot in time. So you're just taking all of the current cumulative.
Well, and they're asking, do you want all of the individual cost per students, or if the actual DEPRA should be the average?
Aggregate. Yep. Aggregated average.
Okay, I'm still, so do I put, what I'm trying to figure out is where we put the numbers in. Because you have those boxes, and it has the ratio or where do I put that on my box?
If you put it over 1, it makes it a whole number.
And that's what I want. That's what I need.
Yes. You can do that, and you can qualify it. You can add specific detail if it's a dollar and cent thing that you want to put in the narrative portion, right?
Okay.
Below.
Okay.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for that question.
I also have a question related to this item. We are looking at the average cost of our participants based on this. And is this going to be based on their average cost or in relation to the amount spent to the amount budgeted for student costs?
Just the total amount spent. You're just looking, I would be taking, if I had 3 participants, participant 1 had 12,000, participant 2 had 18,000, and participant 3 had 4,000. I'd be taking those 3 and averaging. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
There are distinctions for you guys, because you certainly have some, for at least some of our grantees I know have some, for example, that, take advantage of the stipend, but others may not. So there's a lot of deviation, right, in terms of the cost. You don't need to spell out the breakdown, because I see the breakdowns in the DCS. Just give me total with total average. Okay.
All right, I think that's all the questions right now.
Thank you for those questions, guys. Okay, I promise my pop quiz is over. I want to shift gears a little bit now and talk a little bit more about debt referral. And this is getting a little more into the weeds of things I've been sharing with you guys for the last, I don't know, year and a half, maybe 2 years now, about what we see happening on the debt referral side. So I think there are a couple of lessons learned. This is something that has been a growing concern. I will say that there's a big positive trend, meaning we have far fewer people going into debt referral over the last 5 years than we have in prior years. So it's always on an upward trend in terms of successful completers. And even among those who are going into debt referral, many of them are going in there voluntarily. So many of you, I would say in the 16 cohort in particular, see this, may have observed that you have a number of participants who've gone into that requesting to pay back through cash, as opposed to service payback for, again, any number of reasons. So this is one kind of, I want to review quickly that, some of them ask, they don't want to do the service payback requirement for whatever reason, it doesn't work for them. They've exited without completion. And so they're required to start paying back the obligation just as a loan. And then the participant exited. This is where we talk about debt collection, debt referral. the participants exited, whether successful or not, and hasn't communicated, i.e. hasn't interacted with the data collection system to provide any updates as to their status of service payback or cash payment. And so that's when things go awry. Next slide, please. I've talked in recent months about the fact that I would say even maybe at the tail end of the FY16 cohort, meaning the very beginning of when people started getting referred, the US Department of Education has a debt referral office. They handle and sort of are the liaison, if you will, between our agency and the US Department of the Treasury, where debt referral goes for processing and actual collection. There was a point in time until recently when the department, for example, I know this happened with some of your grantees where they had a really nominal amount and they wanted to pay it back. When it's somebody volunteering, frankly, to pay back their in cash, it was handled through the department's own debt collection office. Now, all of the debt referral, debt collection work has been ceded to the US Department of the Treasury. That's a really important distinction, because what it means is if there's anybody with an appeal or a concern about the accuracy or has any extenuating circumstances, I can do nothing for them, meaning they have to interact solely directly with the US Department of the Treasury. All I can say is it is not a fun process. It is akin to anybody else, that could be ultimately subject to things like wage garnishment, not receiving, for example, COVID stimulus benefit, et cetera. So any number of ways that the federal government can and will garnish funds, they'll do so in order to pay off that principal. The added concern that I have these days about this issue is that when it goes to Treasury, it is not a simple, okay, you now pay them. It comes with its own host of penalties and fees that can increase the amount owed by anywhere from 30 to 200%. It's frightening how huge and quickly those debts can balloon. I share this with you because I can't implore you enough the importance of relaying to anybody who exits your program what their responsibility is with respect to follow-up, i.e. communicating with the department via our data collection system. That happens through communication and interaction with the help desk and with the automated messages that they receive from that system. What we've done of late, and I had one grantee, and I was really glad they came to me and they said, we've got, in this grantee's case, I want to say they had, somebody owed like $35. Some other person owed, I think, as much as maybe $2,000. But really what it meant was they were so nominal that when they tried to let the folks know that this stuff was going to get referred to Treasury and they were going to need to pay this, they were like, I'm not paying that. I'm not going to pay that. And it seemed nominal and something that they could ignore. And so after some deliberation and discussion here internally, what we decided was that, it wasn't enough, obviously, to get an automated email from the DCS, even if you've conveyed to them that that's what they should be looking out for. And I sent a letter to them. And I sent a letter to them explaining what the ramifications were. And it came on letterhead. It came from our director. I'm going to ask you, Sarah, to go to the next slide and we can see it a little bit better, I think. And I want to highlight some of this. And again, when you get the slide deck, I've highlighted those items in red where it really is helpful for you to go ahead and, lift that language to the extent you're trying to explain to these individuals what they should be prepared to do. So in this particular case, I was letting them know that they had this debt. They had a service payback agreement signed, bona fide, that they need, that holds them, that binds them to this responsibility. And in many cases, I'm saying, especially after they've exited, participants in general, I have not seen them be particularly great about going into the system after you've exited them. So there's a little bit of a difference this time around as we go and talk about our FY18 grantees, you guys who are 5-year grants, because frankly, you guys have them more of a captive audience because you're active longer and you're able to see what is or isn't happening for a much longer period than you might have in the past. But you see that I highlight when they have not, logged into the system, give them the information to log into the system and call the help desk if they need help doing so. I want to call your attention to the terminology about where the debt actually goes. So the debt initially goes to what we call the Centralized Receivable Service, or CRS. That's the entity that, I'll just be really frank, they'll get a letter from that says, you need to take care of this. You need to call us immediately to make a payment. They're also the same people that will call them as much as 13 times in a 10-day period if they're not picking up. Once they've made that good faith effort, CRS, to reach out to that individual, if that individual has decided they're not going to worry about it, that's when it gets ugly. That's when those penalties and fees kick in, and it gets referred to another arm of the Treasury that moves them toward things like wage garnishment. And that's usually when we get people's attention. And it's far too late because they have not taken that time to address it. And it doesn't look good, frankly, that they've ignored it. So I'm just throwing out that language. It's more, again, for you to think about ways that you can communicate to your grantees with them, or your participants rather, about how to make sure that they're staying on top of this stuff. We've talked about this, I know, in our training of the DCS, where, for example, somebody exits, and if you go into your system today and people have exited and you see payback not in progress, I believe that's the term. I think it says payback not in progress, or payback in progress, service payback in progress. If you see it payback not in progress, I want to remind you there are 2 reasons that might be taking place. One is, the simple answer is, the participant hasn't done anything, hasn't entered any data about where they're working to try to get credit, or maybe they just don't have the placement yet. Or 2, they do have the placement, they are completing service payback, they have entered the data, and the data has gone to the employer, but the employer has not addressed it, i.e., at the end of the day, the system pings the employer using the contact information that the participant has provided, and the employer must respond to an email with a link. It is far from ideal, the measure that we take now and we have the ability to take. So it's really beholden on the participant to make sure that they're hand-holding the employer and making sure that they're aware that they need to go in when they see this email, they need to read it, and they need to click on that link and verify the amount of time or service payback period that the participant is asking credit for. So we'll go through that again as we do annually, but I just want to kind of throw that out there more with an eye to, if you see people that have exited and haven't done so, haven't looked at this stuff, make sure they're looking at it. In the last year, we have slowed down debt referral, period, because of COVID. That's going to be short-lived. So, just because they haven't been sent a debt referral notification doesn't mean that they're not slated in the near term for that. So I would just again ask you to take a look and in your respective accounts and identify where folks are, and if you're seeing them not making either the payback, either it says it's not in progress or whatnot, that you're reaching out to them and understanding why. It would be great for you to include that in your APR, but if you don't, it's important that you do two things. That one, any outreach you do, whether by phone, email, etc., by letter, that you're saving that, keeping that on file to show your good faith effort in reaching out to them and notifying them of their obligation. And two, because I might need to call you if I'm seeing this, and I would never forward a debt without confirming with you and talking through with you what kind of problem solving we might need to take on to resolve the issue. So I know that was long-winded, and I apologize for having to take so much time with that, but it's really important. And I do not want to see participants, as I know you don't, find themselves in a really difficult position that frankly they will not be able to get out of. Are there any questions?
Yes, Angela, I have one. This is Kelly. Okay, I have a participant that we referred her to a school. We had sent her job postings to a school that was going to be a good fit. She decided not to take those, but instead went to work for a private Christian school and just said, well, I'm just going to go into payback. Can she use, because I went into the system and I noticed that she has not logged anything that's saying that she is, that hers is in progress. Can she use that private school because she is employed? She's worked, that's what I was afraid of.
No, a private school will not apply. It has to be a public school or a charter school or a BIE funded school.
Okay, because that's what we had talked to her about that.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned that she may be one of those that's maybe possibly ignoring, because she's ignoring us. We've sent resources to her. We've tried to reach out to her, and it's crickets. We're not hearing anything.
I would recommend sending a letter that's really explicit about the fact about what kind of school, i.e., a K-12 public charter BIE school that would count for service payback. I would include in that just a reference to the regulations. Sarah, if you want to, I don't know if you have the link to the regs, but if you want to just throw that in the chat, but feel free to just incorporate that, Kelly. And again, you've done that outreach, and if she still chooses, really what should be happening is, and you might want to advise her as such, is that because she's not in a qualifying job placement, her responsibility would be to go into the DCS and say, I'm electing for cash payback because I'm not working at a place that qualifies. Now, here's the other challenge, guys, that I'm just going to throw out there. And I'm going to use that example, Kelly, if you don't mind, where, there's somebody who starts off, for example, not working in a qualifying job, but maybe next year they end up at a BIE school and they say, hey, I'm at a BIE school now. What do I do? What they're going to have to do is, and this is the hard part, they can't come back to the department. We can't intervene. They're going to have to go to Treasury and make an appeal. And when they work through that appeals process, Treasury connects with us. And that's when we say, oh yeah, take her off, remove the debt and let's switch her back to service payback. But the participant can no longer come to the DCS or to me. I will not be able to do anything. Treasury requires that they work through them. So that's the other challenge, Kelly. And, at the end of the day, it's no different than, you saying you have no control over another colleague's IHE, right? Institution. You have no say, and I don't. So that all becomes contingent on their being persistent in reaching out to Treasury to make that shift. So that's the other caution, guys, as you think about, as they come back and tell you that, and tell them it's not only going to be difficult, because you're going to do cash payback, but if you change your mind, that's a good thing, because that's really the intent of the grant. But it could take some time for that to happen, and don't expect that the day you start, it's the Treasury is going to, be keeping up with your schedule. You might still be paying until they process or whatever it is that they do on their end. Okay.
Sorry, I realized I'm just muted and talking. So we have two more questions related to that. One being, Carmelita is asking that she's guessing this includes mission schools on reservations.
Anything that is not defined as a local education agency, which includes charter or BIE schools, is not a qualifying job placement.
And then Renuka was asking, all these schools must have an existing Indigenous language program in place, correct? And that's in her program's case.
I'll have to look, that's program specific, Renuka. I'll have to look at that separately.
And that's all the questions right now.
Okay. So thank you for your attention to that, folks. I just wanted to call that out. And, again, to the extent you might be hitting, that time of year in either in May, June, or come, September, as you realize who's coming back or who's not. If you want to walk through some of these things again to make sure you're giving them what they need, and we can be on the same page, I'm happy to do that. So just keep me posted if there's any clarifications that you need on that. Next slide. So I'll say very little about this outside of the obvious, which is the upcoming applicant webinar, the March 25th. The notice inviting applications is on our site and just directly at Federal Register. And the OIE website has a lot of information, including some of the items I talked through in that last training on March 4. So again, if you haven't had a chance, I encourage you to be part of the next webinar. And if you can't make it, there's definitely a recording and lots of good stuff on our program site. So I encourage you to look there. I'm going to turn it over to you, I think, Sarah.
Okay. And there's one question before we keep going, which is, can they work at a tribal college in a tutor type position? Recruiting students for HISET.
No. So another way that might be helpful to folks to think about this, and this is really about both your existing grant and any new grant, is remembering that this grant is funded under the authorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which means that the intent is to support K-12 students. There is allowability for pre-K to the extent that the pre-K is part of an LEA, but pre-K, tribal preschool, where it's a standalone, it's not part of a larger district or charter, that would not count. So again, I'm happy to take any specific issues offline questions, but just be aware of that's sort of big picture, that really the congressional intent is to support improving the academic achievement and outcomes of Native students in LEAs that serve a high proportion of Indian students. I want to turn to the fun stuff, but I guess before I do, I have my deadline, my looming reminder. I forgot.
Gentle deadline reminder.
So just the reminders. I've shared with some of you, but I'll share with all of you that, these decisions, it's good and bad in that we're going to be making every effort to make continuation award decisions quite early this year, certainly earlier than we normally do, in part because we have a very different timeline, right, with respect to the new grant competition. So that is the urgency with these APRs. And that is why I encourage you to be as complete as you can, because there will be very little time for me to do the due diligence on this. So beyond what you provide. Next slide.
And we're going to come back there as time allows.
Yeah.
We have covered all of the questions. So yes, now we're on to the fun part,
Yeah.
which is the upcoming project director meeting. And everyone who is a project director should have received an email today already asking you to register and to get your team registered. Remember that as project directors, you're required to attend because this is your project director meeting. Since we're not traveling this year, this is your virtual version. But then you can bring 2 other members of your team. So be thinking about who you think would be a great fit to attend with you. You don't have to attend the same session. So I want to tell you a little bit about what's going to be actually in the event to help you kind of select your team. So it's going to be Tuesday to Thursday, April 20th to 22nd from 1 to 6:15 Eastern each day. So whatever that would be for you in your individual time zone. Some of you, it'll still be morning. But within there, each day will start with an opening session where we'll all be together as a group. And then we'll follow up with 2 breakout sessions, each of those 75 minutes. Each breakout session will have 4 options for you to pick from, so that within those 4 options, we'll have a myriad of different topics so that you can go to the things that are most applicable to your program. And if there's more than one thing applicable to your program, you can split your team up and go to more than one. Then after the 2 breakout sessions where you'll select your 75-minute sessions, we'll wrap up each day with a networking session where you'll be able to have that discussion and collaboration with your peers as well as with the speakers from throughout the day. It'll be an opportunity to interact with any keynote speakers we've had, with other grantees who have presented, with subject matter experts that have presented that day, and be able to just have that more casual and deeper conversation. And that will be each day. So all 3 days will work that exact same way. The other nice thing being everything is going to be recorded. So again, even within your group of 3, if you have 3 people who are attending, but you're thinking all 4 sessions just look like I need to go to them, that's okay. They're recorded. So then you can later, as I always say, watch it Netflix style. You can be watching that OIE content to your heart's content for days on end, because it will be archived for a year post-event as well. So you'll still have access to those other sessions, or if there's one that you just want to rewatch or potentially share with your team. So really encourage you to go ahead and get yourself and your 2 team members registered, because the sooner we can get all of that registration out of the way, the sooner we can open it up to where you can actually get in and look at the various sessions and see what's going to be happening there, start engaging in discussion and sharing, and so that we'll know if we have space to allow for any additional people to be able to attend. So that's my plug to go ahead and get that registration in. If for some reason you're a project director and you did not get the email, please reach out to us and I'll share our contact info again at the end of the webinar today and let us know. If you are not a project director, you would not have received the email. Since it is limited seating, we just sent it out to those PDs to be able to select their team of 3.
Let me mention a couple of other things real quick, Sarah. I got to tell you guys, we're really excited about this meeting. I guess the good news for you all is you won't have to hear me so much. I think that's the good news. We're really excited about the presenters that we have, and frankly, the idea that you're going to be able to be in these events with some of our grantees across the grant programs also opens up, I think, a lot of opportunity for you guys to network and, just to really take advantage in a different way. So, well, I would love to see you all in person. I think this kind of format really allows us a kind of flexibility we haven't had before. So we're pretty excited about that. And I hope you guys will find a value add on this too. And I was going to offer a prize for whoever binged watched the most, but I'll get sued. So I'm going to have to not say that. Okay.
Give you a virtual gold star on our next talking circle. All right. And in the meantime, don't worry. You don't have to wait till the PD meeting to see us again. We have other events coming up for you. So we are continuing with our distance learning series. We do that every other Tuesday from 3 to 4:30 Eastern. Coming up next week, we have virtual assessment. So Alani will be sharing with you some great tools and tips for doing virtual assessment. And then as we head into the next few months, April will be doing small group engagement, talking about how to work one-on-one or with small groups of students. Then we'll talk about virtual field trips, games, and more. That's always fun. And then just some general ways to increase that student engagement. And we will wrap up the academic school year with our virtual share fair on June 1st. We also have coming up the rest of this month on March 25th, which is next Thursday, we have our OIE office hours. That's that informal session that we hold monthly where you can pop in and out at any point during that hour to ask any questions that you might have. And then if nothing else, we will definitely see you on April 16th, the week prior to the project director meeting for our next PD program talking circle for the month of April. So those are the different things that hopefully you have on your calendar at the ready to join. You'll notice that Sarah Whitehead has popped conveniently into the box the feedback survey for all of you. So if you don't mind popping that up, answering those questions, it is just a couple of questions, not very many at all. It takes 2 to 3 minutes max. While you're doing that, I'll go ahead and pop up our contact info. So like I said, if for some reason you're a project director and you did not get that PD meeting invite today, shoot us an email there and we will get back to you at that oie@seiservices.com. And if you have any final questions, we still have a whole minute left in our time together. We were just perfect on time today. So if you have any final questions, please feel free to share those. Otherwise, have a wonderful weekend.
Sarah, when will we get this slide deck out to everybody?
Monday.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be sending out the recording link and the slide deck.
Okay.
Okay, I have a real quick question.
Yep.
Okay, the GEFRA that talks about if an individual basically completes their induction on time. On that one, are we just putting 999? Okay.
Yep. Pretty much, I'm assuming almost everybody would do that. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I think we may have run through all the questions. So one last plug, we've got that survey over there in the chat box. Take 2-3 minutes if your internet's a little sluggish today, Max, to knock that out and then have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.